dad that we were able to have for so many years. And I wanted to share just a couple stories that kind of illustrate what kind of dad he was for Corey and I, and then Stephen and Caitlin, which I will say, Stephen and Caitlin are his kids too, in every way as well. He loved them as if he got to raise them since they were babies. So, as people have talked about, we all felt really unconditionally loved by Dad. And one of my stories that reminded me of that was when I was 21 or 22, we were recounting a couple months ago that for his birthday, I got him tickets to my favorite band, which is to go see Melissa Etheridge in concert. And like, we were the only father-daughter duo there. And you know, he went, he was super happy to be there and super happy to partake in that experience. And it reminded us when we were recounting that experience that when I was like 15 or 16, he decided to bring up to me, out of the blue, that, you know, and I can't remember exactly how he said, but he's like, I just want you to know that no matter what, I'm gonna love you. If you love people who are women or men or, and so it's just so funny because I'm not a lesbian, but I love that my dad is the kind of guy who just like went out, and this is not a time when people did that as often either, but he just was like, I knew he thought about it for months and decided that like he wanted to make sure that he knew that I was gonna be loved unconditionally forever. One of the other stories, which is also not super flattering, was the time that I came home and I started sneaking around smoking cigarettes when I was like 18 or 19. And I came home once, and I was really great at covering up the smell, I'm sure. And I came home once, and he's like, I know you smoke. I'm like, oh, I was just lying. He goes, the only thing you could do that will hurt me is to lie to me about who you are. And so I just think, okay, like, I mean, that's just the kind of dad he was. It was always just make sure that I know who you are and that I get to see you and love you. We did learn a few things about Dad that have been a little bit questionable. Corey went through his house and helped clean out all of his closets and stuff that he's been collecting. And among them, we are starting to wonder a little bit if Dad was a doomsday prepper. He found like all these like sword throwing things and like nunchucks and like a scarf you wear if you're in Afghanistan. So we are learning some questionable things about him as this would go on too. But I just want to close also with saying my dad's mom passed away 9 years ago this week, like almost to the day when he passed. And he was his mom's son. He reminds us a lot of my great-gram, their great-gram. And at her funeral, he gave a eulogy, and it said, I often think to myself when I'm deciding how to act, what would Graham do? And I think that's exactly what I think about my dad. Trying to act in a way that he would act, trying to react in a way that he would act, trying to treat people the way that he would treat them. So I'm just thankful that that is something she passed on to him and that we can celebrate. So that is all. Thank you all.
Well, I didn't really know Dan as a youngster, as a child, or when he was growing up at all, but I did get to hear a couple of stories about his nature, and my favorite one you're gonna have to listen to, I think it was second grade, you guys can correct me if this is wrong, but this is a lot of the nature of the way Dan was. He was in the second grade class, and the teacher came in, everybody was seated, and Dan noticed that the kid that was in front of him over to the right was not there. And the teacher started class, and seemingly not recognizing, didn't mark anything down that the student wasn't there. And so Dan was really concerned about that. And so before he went out to recess, he went and checked on her desk, and sure enough, she had not marked on her grade book that he was absent. So starting the next day, he brought his own attendance and took attendance every single day. In case they ever needed to check up on it, he'd have an accurate attendance. So that tells you a little bit about his nature and his organization and bestowing it on others. That should help. But here to fill in some more of the pieces about Dan is his nephew, Tim Strike. Thanks, Tim.
If you bet the over-under, the under was the lock. First I want to say thanks to Lynn for conducting yourself the way you have. I feel like I know you a lot better than I do. I think we've maybe only met
Twice, maybe?
twice? Yeah. I've been not sober in your cabin. We were just discussing with my parents if in fact you were at the cabin during the Wisconsin Blues Jamboree. A couple guitars, yeah. Okay, I still can't remember if you were there or not, but the universe is kind of a crazy place. All the things that kind of seem to get interwoven together that have a connection, they really hit you, when big things happen. You think of Dan, and we lost him on Papa's birthday, his dad, and it was I think it was the next day, was the same day that we had lost Graham, his mom. Just, things really start to tie together. On the way down here, my wife and I were talking about, so what are you gonna say? I don't know. Ange called us, was that last night? I think my day's messed up. Last night, hey, do you mind speaking? And inside I'm going, I want nothing to do with that. But if you know me, if you've ever met me, and as you meet me later today, usually it's a problem with getting me to stop talking versus getting me to start. So we're talking through it, and I kind of mentioned a few things I'd like to say, and things got quiet, and I turned on my streaming music, and not the original, but a version of Danny's song, Crazy Universe. Bomber, I apologize. Dan was the cool uncle. Like he was the good-looking one, right? He was the. I never bothered to ask, but I'm just going to assume that Bomber was the fast one. Like he was the fast swimmer, right? Dan was the cool uncle. He had these vests. He always wore the vests. That was like his style. And as recent as probably in the last year or two, the company I worked for, they were going through a rebrand and had a bunch of old logoed apparel and stuff like that. And they're like, hey, come by the office and grab what you like. And I came by there, and polos didn't fit. And I chuckled to myself because there was a vest. And I thought, man, it's like Uncle Dan. So I grabbed it. It was 2 sizes too big. And it stayed in my closet. But every time I look at that, I think of Dan. Not only was the cool uncle, but he was also the kind uncle. No, not directed at you, Bomber. Either. Granted, we didn't spend a whole lot of time together. Family functions. They live up in Chicago, or from St. Louis. But yeah, Dan, I had to really think hard about any time I ever heard a cross word or a cross tone from Uncle Dan. I couldn't think of one. Even when the kids were getting a little rowdy, getting a little out of line, always with kindness in his heart and his voice, had a calming effect. We saw it in his mom and her sister, and Quinny, all cut from the same cloth. Just very genuine and kind people. I had the very fortunate opportunity for Mike's wife, Kathy. We surprised her for her birthday, and we all got together, and I got a chance to sit down next to Dan and just chat with him a little bit. And I said, how you feeling? He's telling me about his treatments and how things were going, and he's just as lighthearted and upbeat as he could be. And then he shared a lot of stories about former swimmers and people that he's coached, and stories about Len and the cabin and the lake, but he told me what will always be my favorite story, and it's how he met Rose. He went into probably a 20 or 30 minute conversation around how they met. It wasn't your typical boy meets girl. It was boy meets pre-Match.com dating service, and goes on horrendous date after horrendous date. I'll give you the abridged version. Decides to cancel the service. No, you got to go on one more, and the one more that showed up was Rose. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it was a relative of yours that ran the dating service? Right, there we go. And it was kind of as a favor, right? Can you go, right? Can you go? And so they did, and what a cool story. But that's Dan. Dan's thinking I don't want to do this. This isn't working out. But I can't say no. He's such a kind, genuine person. He went on the date, and now that's gonna be my favorite Dan story. I love it. Very cool to see all the love that poured out on social media. I felt like I know Dan even better than I did before, and he talked about only having one regret. My only regret with Dan is I didn't know a lot of that stuff sooner. I didn't know a lot of the wonderful stories that I'm sure a lot of you in the audience shared on social media about him. I always knew he was a great guy. I always knew he was a kind-hearted person, a kind soul. But to hear the stories about how he was always there, how he always showed up, that hit home. Always there for the swimmers that became coaches, the swimmers that developed, and the parents. Just to see the impact he had on their lives. Just reinforced everything I kind of already knew about Dan. So I think it's very clear that some of his last parting words that he gave to all of us is that he definitely left something good behind. Thank you.
Caitlin. It's not in my notes, so I forgot. I apologize. So, continuing our reflections on Dan and our appreciation for him is his daughter, Caitlin.
I went when I was supposed to. I had a really good segue for Angie and my mom. Okay. For the record, Angie is not allowed to do a lot of things, and I learned that when I spent the last few weeks staying at our parents' house, and Mom was trying to be quiet about it at first, like, make sure you do this so that she doesn't think that she can. But to add to the list, Angie's not allowed to make coffee. So as the 6 of us were all working from there for quite some time, we went through quite a bit of coffee, and I was the only one that was allowed to make it outside of Mom. So that was an extra job. Angie is also not allowed to close the blinds. That also added to my list of things that I needed to make sure that I had to do. But in all fairness, I'm not allowed to do laundry. So if that makes you feel any better. I don't know why, but you don't really ask why when she says something either. So again, I'm Caitlin. I'm stepdaughter, but I always said daughter. So I usually am a really good public speaker. So I can't begin to tell you all how difficult it is to stand before you. I'm the crier in the family. An attempt to honor Dan in words. So, although I know I don't have to convince any of you how wonderful he is, I'll do my best to deliver a message where you can kind of envision what kind of father he was to us. Angie told way funnier stories than me. And I apologize that I didn't really aim for humor that much, but I tried. I really did. Or maybe I didn't. First and foremost, I was told to keep this happy. He asked that of us, and I am going to try to do my best to follow that request. But as most of you do know, he was very much a glass half full type of guy, but in reality, his glass was usually overflowing. As a child with recently divorced parents, I was not entirely on board with the concept of having a new dad. I was downright in rebellion, actually. But rebellion didn't really scare him. In fact, he made it a mission. To guide me where I needed it most. And after a long time of trying to resist, I realized I didn't remember why I was resisting in the first place. He had a way of getting me out of my shell, and we found lots of things to create a bond over that could really never be broken. So I'd like to tell a short story of what he's taught me and how he's impacted my life. He taught me how to show up. I spent my middle and high school years going to work early with him every day. So I got all of my homework done before school started because I just sit in his office at a small table, and if any of you ever worked with him, you know how small that office is. It was a storage room, and now it is again, I was told. So he showed me how to love the things that he did, the teaching, coaching, and just being an overall leader. It was astounding. I knew he was special, and today proves that with all of you here and everyone that walked through the door today. He did it all, and he did it all with grace and a really big smile. That attitude built my foundation for wanting to become a teacher myself and a coach. And there's probably many of you in here today that were impacted the exact same way. I mean, how many of you ended up being a teacher or a coach? Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say it was probably him. If not, I mean, maybe you had some other really good role models too, but. He taught me how to use music as an outlet. I've heard lots of stories of how his swimmers complained about how they couldn't listen to anything but the Eagles and the oldies. But for the record, it wasn't different for us at home either. Just saying. Every once in a while, though, we got to play some music in the kitchen that was, it was like the Rat Pack. I don't know if that really counts. It's kind of the same. We'll count that into oldies.
Compromise.
But I adapted, and I really learned to love it. With a long bout of mono in the 8th grade, Dan taught me how to play guitar while I spent almost an entire month out of school. I picked it up fairly quickly, and we'd have our own little jam sessions for a while, and then he bought me my very first guitar. Hotel California became a favorite to play, and our guitars would see many campfires together after that. He taught me how to be a teammate and a leader. He showed up to all of my volleyball matches, whether I was playing or coaching. He always cheered me on. He showed me that we can make the best out of any unruly situation. He exemplified how everything was a learning opportunity and that our actions speak louder than our words. He introduced me to some of the people who go on to be very important role models to me in athletics and beyond, and I know some of those people are here today, so thank you for being here. He taught me how to respect myself. Sorry, this is the hard part. Watching my mother and him was a gleaming example of how a couple should love each other. If you would have just watched them, and you could, it was fun to watch. You could just like stand on the opposite side of the room They'd be just having their moments, and you would just tilt your head and smile and hope one day that you could have something that was nearly as close. It was like watching a happy ending to a fairy tale you always wanted. And that was the best gift he ever gave me. Mostly, he taught me, and likely most of you, how to be a good person. He taught me how to leave a mark on those I worked with and to leave something good behind in anything that I did. And he taught me to be honest, because that's what always mattered most, even when you're in trouble. Our family won't be the same again, but I know we'll live with his memory for generations to come, and we'll always love him. Thank you.
Dan's passion for swimming, his love of swimming, reached all age groups, not just the high school team, but every age group, and he followed swimmers all through college and knew their times and kept in touch with everything they were doing. But when Dan got to West Chicago, there was no year-round swimming program. There was just a summer program called the Sharks that swam out of Reed Kepler Park. He took over that program and made it a year-round United States Swimming Club. And soon the Sharks were growing in size and certainly in recognition as well. And then in 1986, the Sharks had their first JO champion, Jenny Wiegand, 100 breast or 50 breast. And soon the Sharks became frequent flyers on the podium at JO meets and were recognized as a contender and a perennial top 10 team. This strong age group program led to a strong high school program. And in 1991, that consistent ongoing effort led to the first state trophy in any sport at West Chicago Community High School in almost 20 years. So just in the years since the pool had been built, he had turned the state meet and JO meets not into an occasional occurrence, but an expectation, and brought a team to the podium to receive a trophy, and on that trophy winning team were 2 state championship relays. Anybody here from those state championship relays? Corey, Becky, I thought I saw Kate. What about other JO and senior champions? Anybody out there? Stand up and wave. There we go. Jackie Barrett. High school state champions, individuals. Stand up. National qualifiers. Jackie, stand up. So the parade continues. It really went from a program of non-existence to a program that just was on the local and national stage. And that's because Dan's focus was on the athlete, not on the sport. He helped inspire athletes to be better individuals, better teammates, better citizens. We have a state representative here. Where's Karina? Better citizens, would you agree? Better teammates, better students, and yes, of course, better athletes. He passed on his passion for swimming. He passed on an appreciation for a strong work ethic. He passed on graciousness in winning and in losing. He passed on an understanding of personal accountability. He passed on the importance of team over individual. He passed on great life lessons. The awesome individuals in this room range everything from public office to public school teacher, from doctors to lawyers, corporations, large corporations to small businesses, from good friends, good neighbors, good sons, good daughters, good siblings, and good parents, all impacted by the lessons that he taught us. So now here to share a message from a swimmer perspective is a member of the famous state championship medley and 200 free relays, Becky Manning. Baxter.
Well, I am also hoping to make it through this without crying, but but I figure Coach saw a lot of us in tears quite a bit over the years, so it's not going to be anything new for him. But so my name is Becky. I started swimming with the Sharks in summer of '86 and swam from ages 8 to 18 for Coach. And yeah, so a few years after I graduated from college, I was coming home for a wedding and bringing Scott, who's now my husband. And at this wedding, I was like, oh, Scott, you're gonna get to meet Coach and Len. And so I've been telling him a little bit about Coach and Len, and Scott's like, are you sure they're gonna remember you? He's like, it's been quite a few years, and think about all of the other swimmers and students that have passed through during that time. And I thought about it for a second. I was like, oh, will they remember me? And then I'm like, no, you don't understand Coach and Len. They will remember. They remember each and every one of us. And it's true. Coach not only knew the lyrics to every single song, but he knew us individually. He knew our events, he knew our times, he knew our strengths and all of our bad habits in and out of the pool. He knew how to motivate us, and he really knew how to bring the best out of each one of us. But as Coach knew us, we knew him too. And we would use that to our advantage. So there were plenty of times during practice where we would conspire and agree that, well, if we got Coach to tell us one more story, we wouldn't have enough time left in practice to finish that last set. And I knew, like, when Coach would stop me while I was swimming to, give me a couple of pointers, if I asked a few follow-up questions, I'd get to sit out even longer. But what, was orchestrated as opportunities to get out of practicing are actually some of the moments that we cherish most about our time with Coach. And like Len was saying, Coach, he cared about swimming, but he cared about us as individuals. And he was always there for us when we needed him in and out of the pool. Always willing to take a big wet hug from any one of his swimmers. But, so, Coach helped us become better people. And through his coaching, through his mentoring, through his example as a great person, we learned perseverance, we learned consistency. We learned, as Len said, accountability and integrity. And we learned what it meant to set goals for ourselves and what it would take to work to achieve those goals. And most of all, Coach showed us how important it is to be a good and honest person. And I know for myself and for many of the other swimmers here, the impact that Coach has had on my life is profound. And I will forever be thankful for that. Thank you.
Coach and I coached together for about 12 years. it was really my admiration for how he loved his job, how he handled each student and swimmer as the most important person at that particular moment, how he inspired others to be their best is what inspired me to make my career change. And with the support of my wife, went back to college and got a degree in physical education so I could be just like him. And his uncanny ability to make light of the most stressful or annoying situations always cracked me up. It was like a highlight, and I talked to Bomber about this. His quick-witted one-liners in the most uncomfortable moments imaginable, and I won't tell too many stories because some of those parents are here. No, just kidding. I was kidding. I didn't mean that. But he was really quick like that, where if it was uncomfortable, he would just make it funny rather than annoying. So I'll just tell you a couple of these. We were down in, I think it was Peoria, and we were always early for swim meets. I mean, we were always early. You know, I mean, if warm-ups were at 7, we were there at 6:30 with 4 large coffees and whatnot. And for whatever reason that morning we were running late. I would only assume that Angie must have been with us. So here we are, kind of running late. He's driving, and we get down the road. We're ready to go, and this car just stopped in the middle of the street. Just stopped. Boom. And we're like, waiting. There's no getting around him, so we waited. He finally backed up, like went over the median type thing. And instead of getting mad, because it would have been a perfect time to use some colorful language and tell the guy he's number 1, but instead he looked at me and he said, so they park differently here in Peoria, let's make a note of that. Just turned it around and shocked me. We're in a tight meet, and there's an important relay. I think it was like conference champs or something like that, and it's getting real close. And sure enough, the relay third swimmer false starts, and everybody in home place, they'll cry, oh, like that. Everybody knew it, right? So the swimmers come over, they're stressed, they're thinking they're just going to get ripped by the two of us, and it's the most terrible thing. And swimmer comes up and says, do you think I false started? And he said, if you're going to go any earlier, dive in front of the swimmer. TJ, while you're here, I'll just say, I can't remember if it was you or it was Jenny, but you guys both swam the 200 fly at Wabanzi. Remember that? And Jenny, only swimmer I've ever seen swim and fly going backwards. But TJ's was more colorful because he's not a flyer, but he would come down and his goggles would be on, come back up, and they'd be down here. Come back down, they'd be up here. They'd come back down, and they'd be on his forehead. And so he's stressed, and he comes over to talk to Dan, and Dan goes, Teach, there's 2 schools of thought on how to wear those goggles. But, I mean, he did. It just was, I don't know where it came from, but that stuff was just, that's how his mind worked. It was just hilariously funny, even in the toughest situations. Anyway, the other thing besides for that I want to mention is he used to do this, I won't say it annoyed me, but I didn't understand it for the longest time. We would be, say at a swim meet, we get done with the meet, we finished okay, and we'd be on the ride home, and he'd go, yeah, that was our best one. Like, I don't know, last year we trophied, but whatever, You're right, coach, We'd go out on the boat, we'd get out to the middle of the lake, and he'd go, this is the perfect day. I'd be like, it was less windy yesterday, Are you drinking too much? Or we'd play a song, and he'd go, that was our best one. I was like, oh, it was a little flat, I missed the lead, and I forgot the lyrics, but yeah, you're right, that was great. And it took me a while, because it was not irritating, but I couldn't understand why he said that. Was he trying to convince me that was our best one? Was he trying to convince me that it was good? What was he doing? Was this to pep me up? But then I realized he was being honest. That at that moment, at that time, on that day, there was nothing else he wanted to be doing, and that was the best one on that day. So, with that being said, I think we're going to move to Jennifer Heyer-Olson, who's going to read from us a little scripture passage, and we're going to try to wrap this thing up in the next 4 hours. Thank you.
So I have the easy job because if I started to talk, I don't even know. I've decided I'm a super ugly crier, and so I just get to read. And Len and I talked about a reading, and Len and I both agreed that this really spoke about Dan Johnson. It's a reading from the second letter of Paul to Timothy, chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. Thank you.
This is usually where I give a 2-hour homily, so if you want to use the bathroom or something. Dan did compete well. He fought a good fight, as evidenced by how long he was able to fight this fight at the end. He spent his entire life racing around in service to others and helping other people. He was not self-serving. He wasn't egocentric. His time here was spent fighting for others, whether it was through coaching, teaching, developing a curriculum, building decks, taking care of his aging parents, helping with Rose's parents, going to Iowa to visit, babysit grandkids, or any other number of ways that he, as Caitlin said, showed up. He was always busy helping others. That's who he was and how he lived. The second part of the J.O. story that Dan said to me in that conversation, he wasn't thinking about himself when he told me about the cancer. He was worried he wasn't going to be around for his grandkids. He wanted them to have a papa. He did a good job, by the way. His selflessness continued to the end. In our last phone conversation, a couple of days before he died, he was really excited to tell me that he talked to Heather Prochnow, who he hadn't talked to in many years. And in Dan's typical way, he asked me if I would meet with him. He said, "What's your travel plans over Christmas break?" And I said, sometime after Christmas, we're going to go down to St. Augustine and whatnot. He goes, "Well, if you can put some time in there, I want to go over to the pool with Heather Prochnow and her brother Christopher and her boyfriend, and we want to coach them and give them some tips on triathlons." I was like, great. But that's his mindset. His mindset was not on himself, but was on somebody else, as always. I'm going to stop there and let you hear from one of his best friends, Steve Sea-Dog Seaman, who is a college roommate and is going to probably tell us some funny, nasty stories.
I haven't worn a tie in probably 7 years. So, first of all, Corey, great job on the song. Angie, I had no idea about the lesbian thing. And like your dad, I don't want to know. So. And in deference to Angie and her obituary, I have all these pages here, but I have very poor eyesight, so you folks in the back, you probably can read this. I can barely make it out. Can you barely see it? And Caitlin, my wife doesn't let me do laundry either. And all it took was one load of pink laundry. I said that out loud, didn't I? Okay. So I'm going to give you a brief summary of my relationship with Dan in the Dan Johnson, the early years, or DJ as we all call him. And I'll just go ahead and begin. In the fall of 1971, we were enrolled at the University of Northern Iowa. And within a few weeks of the beginning of our fall semester, swim team captains Roy Fielding and Tommy Eaton called a meeting of the freshman class. Mark Crouch from Des Moines Hoover, a guy named Dan Johnson and Steve Rowe from Cedar Falls High School, Bill Fowler, Dave Long, and myself from Cedar Rapids, Kennedy, and 6 or 7 others rounded out that class of swimmers. And this is where I first met DJ. It wasn't long after that meeting that our swim practices began in earnest. 5 days a week from about 3 to 6. Couldn't tell you how many thousands of yards that was, but probably less than Becky swam. That didn't last long because Dan took it upon himself to go talk to Coach Henry and say how much better a team we might be if we had 2-a-day practices. Thank you, Dan. That's sarcasm. Moving forward to 1972, one of my former high school teammates, Mark Onstadt, who we called Big O, transferred in from Mankato State University. And by the spring of 1973, we had had 2 successive conference championships, 2 winning seasons. And by the fall of 1973, when we started our junior year, the 4 of us, DJ, Dog, Big O, and Crouch, decided we would leave dorm life behind and rented the middle floor of a house on 23rd Street right across from campus. And just as a side note, I don't know to this day why Crouch didn't have a nickname. We just called him Crouch. So that was a great geographic location for us. The house was right across the street from campus and right around the corner from the College Hill. And many of you may know about this location of the College Hill, but some of our favorite places down there were the Paw and the Stein, and our very favorite place, and this was for social enhancement, was the OP. The 4 of us had become very good friends and did everything together. Our teammates were our basic circle of close friends, and it was at this time that Dan and I became very close. We had many dinners at Dan's house, and his mom and dad were like second parents to me. And at that time, I met this skinny redhead kid. That was Dan's brother Mike, who everybody called Bomber. Don't know how that came about. Our house became known as the Swimmer's House, and it was there we had team parties, played every Eagles song we had over and over and over again, and got psyched up for meets. And on those cold winter Cedar Falls mornings, we left our comfortable warm beds, bundled into our warmest clothes, cleaned the frost off of Big O's Red Vega, and headed to yet another early morning workout. Again, thank you, Dan. And in 1975, after many great times on team bus trips, where Coach Henry taught us the value of country music, driving to Florida and Arizona for Christmas breaks, for workouts, lots of time in our 20-yard, 4-lane collegiate pool, and too many to count parties and countless good times, we graduated from UNI, leaving behind a legacy of 4 conference championships, numerous conference records, All-American awards from competition at the Nationals, and additionally for Dan, he was the co-recipient of the James Witham Award for Swimming and Leadership, along with our teammate Bill Fowler. This is not sarcastic. Thank you, Dan. Dan's first position was as a phys ed teacher and swim coach at Boone High School, which is a small town in central Iowa. His personal dedication and influence on young men and women he coached was brought to my attention by my eye doctor a few weeks ago. The doctor had been a student of Dan's. He told me how his two best buddies were swimmers, and he said how they respected and admired Dan. The doc said, some people are called to coach and guide young people. It is evident by the posts on social media and those here today that he was right. This is Dan. Proverbs 3:27 was written by King Solomon and to his son. And some biblical scholars say that it was written for people that, young men that he was coaching and schooling. And it was written because he wanted them to pay particular attention to those people. So this is the proverb. Do not withhold good from those who deserve it, when it is in your power to act. Biblical scholars also write that it is our duty to not withhold good, and that good is something we are obligated to do, especially when something good is expected. Or more simply put, treat each other right. This passage describes to me someone who cared for and encouraged those around him. I told my wife to smile at me if I started to lose it. So, this is someone who looks at potential and devises a plan for success. This is someone who understood what his duty to others is, and this is someone who was there for his family and friends, for his team and fellow coaches, to his swimmers and their parents. This is Dan. I was asked by the family to close out this celebration of Dan's life by repeating the last words that I spoke to him. Before I do so, I want to give you a short background story. Since he was 8 years old, I sent my grandson off to school each day by giving him a blessing, a special moment between grandfather and grandson. We begin by hugging each other, and then I recite the verses. At the end, we pat each other on the back. And at the age of 23, when we talk on the phone, he will say, "Pop, can I get my blessing?" And at the end of the blessing, we both say, "Pat, pat." The pat, pat at the end of the 3 short verses seals the deal for us. It connects us physically and spiritually. The pat, pat has become an important part of our relationship. It is not about religion, but it is about a connection with God. It petitions God to always guide and direct him, to be present with him, and to do this always. It is meant to demonstrate my love for him. And this is why I chose to share this blessing with Dan. So if you could all please stand. I encourage you to gather those you love around you. Friends, stand close or put an arm around each other. If you came here alone, no, you are not. Be embraced by all who have assembled here. As we came here today individually or with family and friends to celebrate Dan's life, we know we all leave today sharing in the spirit of a man who loved his wife, loved his family and friends, and in the most generous way fulfilled his duty as husband, father, brother, friend, and coach. For that is Dan, and he could not do otherwise. I offer this blessing to you now. May God bless and keep you. May his face shine on you, and he give you his grace forever. I think you all know how to end this blessing.
Dan was always part of something good. He made things good, and he made good things better. Sharks, the WeGo swim teams, the WeGo Health PE Drivers Ed Department, my family, your family, his family, all good things. He left them better than when he joined them. He lived a legacy of be part of something good and leave something good behind. The best way for us to honor Dan is to remember how he lived and what he taught us, and to live our lives imitating his goodness. So I'll close with this prayer, and I invite you to stick around for one of Dan's favorite Eagle songs that should give you a little bit of this. To you, Lord, we commend the soul of Dan, your servant. In the sight of this world, he is now dead. In your sight, may he live forever. Forgive whatever sins he committed through human weakness, and in your goodness, grant him everlasting peace. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May his soul and the souls of all the faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. Amen. You finished the race. You fought the fight. Rest in peace. Should be a song. There it is.
The perfect day, the sun is sinking, as if you thought the gentle breezes blow, the time we share went by so fast, just like a dream. We knew it couldn't last, but I'd do it all again if I could somehow. I must believe soon
Thank you all for being here. We much greatly appreciate it. We are going to move now back to the Commons where there is food and there's going to be a microphone for people to tell fun stories about Coach. And I would urge you to YouTube that real song with the Eagles singing it. You're going to like it a lot better. But, you know, copyright and getting words and all that stuff. We got a cheesy one. But listen to the real one. You're really going to like it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Let's go downstairs and celebrate.
Ha ha ha.